The global energy war is here, and it's having a massive impact on all of the world's energy suppliers. Countries are scrambling to build up new solutions based on green energy and do away with the oil and gas dependencies of years gone by. But what does this mean for global power balances? Who will triumph and who will fall behind as countries try to establish a green energy supply chain? The US, and North America on the whole, has become a major energy exporter over the past decade. But this could be threatened by the green transition. Is the future of America bright with clean energy? Or will it sink into darkness as other producers overtake it? This is Capital Matters, and this is the future of North American energy. First things first. Why does energy production and energy independence matter? It isn't just about geopolitics. When energy is imported, everything from electricity to cars to basic goods could potentially be more expensive for the average consumer. The North American Trade Agreement, USMCA, means that the US, Canada, and Mexico are in some ways one big economy. All of them benefit from a single, low-tariff market that keeps energy prices cheap. Maintaining low energy prices is an important part of keeping costs low, fighting inflation at the source. And the current cornerstone of this is oil and natural gas. Oil and natural gas production in North America is very much alive. This is because of the Shale Revolution and has been fantastic for economic activity. Shale oil is produced from fracking, a controversial process which has grown in popularity because it produces both oil and natural gas. This is great for North American companies. On the one hand, fewer oil imports from the Middle East and less dependence on OPEC. And on the other, more natural gas production, both for exports and to fuel industrial production. This has catapulted the US to the top of the world's producers of both oil and natural gas, and Canada isn't much further behind. The benefits for households and consumers have been enormous, not just because it costs less to keep the lights on or watch YouTube videos. Anything that requires energy inputs to make or transport is affected by the base price of electricity. This is just as true for tech firms in California as it is for aerospace manufacturing in Tijuana. Everybody wins, right? Well, not exactly. First, there are environmental and social costs. Fracking involves injecting massive amounts of chemicals into the ground, causing damage to the surrounding area and potentially harming groundwater reservoirs. This means that not many people are happy about having shale exploitations near them. And then there's the pipelines. Shale oil and gas need to be transported to be effectively used. This usually means building massive pipes to get the gas from point A to point B. And if you remember the controversy that resulted in the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, you'll see why. People aren't going to just up and move for the sake of international gas flows. And the things in the way are often more than just houses, towns, homes, indigenous lands. There are limits to the power of eminent domain, and for good reason. But this leads to problems. The US actually already lacks the infrastructure to fully take advantage of its existing exploitations. Too much production and no way to move it. This is essentially the same as not being able to produce it at all. And with so many people opposed to having that kind of infrastructure near their homes and communities, that makes future developments even more iffy. Those huge Canadian reserves you probably heard about? It's very unclear as to whether they'll ever be actually developed. If offshore exploitations can't expand, it's therefore reasonable to assume that North America is reaching peak oil. So that's oil and gas. But what about renewables? North America has all sorts of advantages when it comes to renewable energy. Opportunities for wind, solar, and even hydropower abound, the benefits of a highly diverse geography. Sunlight and wind are the raw materials of renewable energy, but harnessing them requires at least one more key element: lithium. You can't directly power your car with a wind turbine or a solar panel, so what really matter are the batteries. Lithium is the primary material used to build those batteries, and the race for the sources of lithium is essentially a modern oil rush. So when it comes to lithium, theoretically, the US, Canada, and Mexico are set. Massive deposits have been found. Game over, right? Nope. As we've mentioned in other videos, it's not just about the deposits. It's also about the refining capacity, taking the raw material and transforming it so that it can actually be used. And frankly, I'm rather iffy on the future of lithium refining, at least in the US. Refining capacity is 1, much rarer than raw reserves, globally speaking, 2, kind of time-consuming to bring online, and 3, ironically, rather environmentally destructive. Ultimately, it boils down to this. Are American citizens willing to make the necessary compromises to allow for lithium extraction at scale? And if they aren't, well, who can blame them? There are always environmental costs to mining, and many of these deposits are found near communities or indigenous American lands. So these would be the groups that are adversely affected by the externalities. The development of America's oil and gas operations disproportionately displaced and impacted indigenous American communities, and activists and politicians are unwilling to allow those kind of disruptions ever again. There are consequences to this. In this case, literal dollar costs. Every oil barrel that goes undrilled in the US is one that has to be imported from somewhere else for a higher price. Every lithium mine that goes unbuilt in the US, or in Canada or Mexico, is one that another country might happily construct, and whose resources would then be etched into the global supply chain. American companies recognize this, and so do other countries. Businesses are hardly going to let the domestic unwillingness to mine lithium stop them from producing hybrid and electric vehicles. They'll continue to produce, but the lack of domestic mines will mean pivoting towards other suppliers and supply chains. A good example of this is Tesla, an American company for sure, and one that benefits from American industrial policies like the Inflation Reduction Act. A lot of the lithium it uses for its batteries is sourced from China. This has an impact on Tesla's manufacturing and China's EV ecosystem. Tesla wants to keep production close to its sources of lithium, so transport costs stay low. And Chinese companies want Tesla around because that encourages other parts of the EV supply chain to cluster nearby. This is why one of Tesla's gigafactories is located in Shanghai, the heart of China's EV market. This also means that it's really easy for Tesla to sell directly into the Chinese market, something that comes with all sorts of geopolitical baggage. And then there are countries that are definitely doing a better job of harnessing the power of supply chains. Saudi Arabia, already a massive player in oil, is using the dividends from that to expand its presence in lithium, both through extraction and by building out its refining capacity. Once again, because refining capacity is different from simply having deposits, what the Saudi government wants is to be a middleman, importing lithium from resource-rich countries who mine it, and then refining it to sell to countries that use it to build things like EVs. But the real standout here is Indonesia. Indonesia is using geography to put itself at the center of the emerging lithium supply chain, attracting foreign investment to create new mines and partnering with countries like Australia to increase its refining capacity and its export capacity. The ultimate goal, though, is manufacturing. In 2020, Indonesia banned exports of nickel, which is another major component for EV battery manufacturing. Its expanding lithium refining capacity means that Indonesia is positioning itself to become a manufacturing hub for all of Southeast Asia. This is exactly the sort of maneuver that made both China and Japan wealthy in the second half of the 20th century. So what does all of this mean for North America? Well, for one, that oil and gas are pretty soundly established, but also that expanding the existing base is hard. As energy consumption increases, so too will prices. North America will either have to reckon with expanding its energy infrastructure with new mines, wells, and pipelines, or go back to energetic dependency on countries that did. North American companies are perfectly happy to take advantage of incentives like the Inflation Reduction Act to build things like EVs outside of America, where they can be closer to the supply chain and where labor costs are lower. So that glorious moment of energy independence could end up being very, very brief. All of this to say that it's complicated and that the devil is in the details. And if you too wish to find devilish delight in the details, come and join us on Substack, where we have a much more exhaustive analysis of the current oil ecosystem. It's a blast, by which I mean that equities traders in New York and sheiks in the Middle East are all pulling their hair out. Check out the link in the description, and thanks for tuning in.